Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is over, but we are just getting started here on post-show recaps. That's right, it is full spoiler recaps. We're binging a new season of a show every week and chatting about it in full spoilery detail in just one, count 'em, one podcast. I'm Jess Sterling, and today we are discussing Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, and I am joined here by my ex and the leader of a league of my exes that is coming to get me, Grace Leeder.
Ex-podcast host. That's what you meant, right? Like we've done other
Exactly
pods
what I
together.
meant.
Like we used to
Yes.
podcast about Succession. We don't podcast about Succession right now. So we're
No,
ex-podcast
so we're
hosts,
exes.
even
Yeah.
though we're also doing this podcast every week. But
Yeah.
you know, who's
But we're exes
counting?
in other ways.
Yeah. I'm from Toronto. That's a way I'm connected to
There you
this.
go.
This
Canadian.
show. Yeah. Canadian. Yeah.
It's perfect.
I'm excited to chat about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off with you, Jess. Yeah.
Yeah, I for those who aren't aware, I have never Scott Pilgrimed a single version of Scott Pilgrim in my life. So this was very new to me. So I cannot wait to chat about it because let me tell you, I went into this, I had no expectations. I had no idea the plot. You know, I had no idea who was even all involved in terms of voice actors and such. So I went in with a completely clean slate, and my experience was very interesting. But you, Grace, I know you are much more well versed in the Scott Pilgrim universe.
I mean, much more. I don't know. I am.
Well, you've seen the you saw the movie before, but like, okay, have you seen the movie more than once?
I don't think so. I think I've only seen it once. I've seen a lot of clips of the movie though, like TikTok and stuff. Yeah. So I have never watched or I've never read the graphic novel either, which we were corrected last week, and I said, I feel like it's heavily based on the movie, which it is in the sense that the entire main cast from the film adaptation returned to reprise their voices, but the actual story is more like the graphic novel than it is the movie. I think there's like some pretty noticeable changes between those two, like the TV and the movie compared to the graphic novel. So versed-ish a little bit. But I hadn't visited in a while. I would like to watch the movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I've not rewatched. I didn't have time before we got together, but I would like to watch it. Yeah.
Can I impress you, Grace? Can I impress you right now?
Yes.
I not only watched the entire series.
Wow. Okay.
I watched the movie today.
Wow.
So
very impressive.
Now I know I have Scott Pilgrimed both The World and Taking Off. We've done the both.
We've watched the same amount of Scott Pilgrim. So.
But we watched them in different orders, which
That's
I
true.
think is a more fascinating way to look at this. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today in full spoiler detail. So if you have not watched the series, all 8 episodes, they're on Netflix. You can go watch them now. They're like 30 minutes a piece. Honestly, very, very bingeable, very easy to go from one episode to the next, I will say. And then pause and then come back and listen to the podcast. Of course, while you're at it, you can subscribe, pusherrecaps.com/full spoiler recaps. And if you want to see everything Pusher Recaps is covering currently, go to pusherrecaps.com/subscribe because there's a lot of TV happening still, always, every day. So go check all of that out. But Grace and I are going to start talking about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. So this is your final warning. This was so interesting. And I felt like, obviously, knowing it comes from like a graphic novel and then it's, you're having an animated product makes sense to me. It felt like a very smooth transition. When I first started watching this as an animated series, Grace, I didn't understand how it wasn't always an animated series. Like, it did not compute in my brain that this would have been able to be live action.
It's interesting though. I think for me, as I was watching it, I definitely liked it. I definitely thought it was an easy watch, but I don't know that I loved it as much as I have been seeing people say they love it. So I'm very excited. I was very nervous that we were both going to come in and you were going to be like, this was really my jam. And I was going to be like, yeah, I'm really like exactly like, I wasn't like over the moon with it. I thought it was pretty fun. And there's definitely stuff in here I liked, but I mean, it is kind of the perfect like I think to your point, it's like almost surprising that they made the movie first. It does feel like in this world
feels like the opposite order.
It does feel like that a little bit.
So do we want to do the quick plot recap before we jump into like our thoughts and feelings on every aspect of this?
Let's do it. Yes.
Okay.
So the story revolves around Scott Pilgrim, who's basically unemployed, but he is the bassist of a band called Sex Bomb, and he does live in the great city of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He's also roommates with Wallace Wells, who we'll get into more. He doesn't have a super central role to the story, but he's in there, voiced by the wonderful Kieran Culkin. He meets Ramona Flowers, a girl he's been dreaming about, and he starts dating her despite already dating a girl named Knives Chow. Ramona's exes, known as the League of Evil Exes, and predominantly Matthew Patel, target Scott at one of Sex Bomb's show, and they seemingly kill him. Ramona looks to figure out who killed him and why, and after a series of battles and confrontations, Scott's roommate, Neil, writes a mysterious screenplay, and Ramona suspects it holds the key to all of these strange events. Basically, as the story unfolds, it's revealed that the League of Evil Exes created a portal to the future, and Scott was actually transported there by a future version of himself. And he learns about his future with Ramona, where they date and get married, but eventually divorce. And basically, older Scott is trying to actually brought Scott to the future to prevent him from dating Ramona in the first place so that he would not experience heartbreak. Ramona eventually finds Scott, but they are attacked by an even more future Scott, who is furious that Scott did not prevent himself from dating Ramona and therefore causing him heartbreak. Future Ramona, Scott, Ramona, all the exes fight off future Scott and basically save the day. The end of the TV show sees Gordon and Julie plotting against Scott and Ramona, seemingly setting up potentially another season of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. That's basically what happened. There's a lot more we'll get into with the exes and Wallace and all sorts of other shenanigans.
Yeah, this is wild. So I didn't know what to expect, right? Like it's obviously very cartoony. They're in a band. Okay. It's kind of like teen drama comedy kind of thing is how I felt. And then we meet Ramona. Everything is great. And then Scott dies. Yeah. And I feel like I blacked out. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is a joke because there's just coins left. And then they have a funeral, and I was like, maybe I should start taking this seriously. And then the 7 evil exes, and I was like, okay, now I understand what I'm watching. My reality has been figured out. I understand we're in a world with magical vegans and portals and robots and really Ramona versus Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, it's an animated show. It's a graphic novel based on a graphic novel. It feels very anime, like it's very anime, obviously video game inspired. It felt like, what is it,
Street Fighter, where it's like this person versus this person type of thing.
Yeah,
and you have the guy who's always rolling his fists. If you're watching the video on PushRecaps.com/YouTube,
and they're also doing a lot of this motion where it's just arms back and forth to show that.
Have you seen the TikToks of people that are pretending to be video game characters?
No, but that's great. I have seen maybe some of the fake Grand Theft Auto ones or whatever. So
some of my favorites are the ones where people are just doing the starting position where they're kind of moving back and forth, or the ones where I think I've seen one where it's more of a open world type of MMO type of game, and it's a character that you can't, they're walking on top of chairs, and then their head turns very awkwardly as they're walking into walls.
Yes.
Those are some of my favorites. They're very funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, noticeably, I think the big difference for me, it even surprised me that Scott Pilgrim disappeared, because that is not my experience from the movie. He is very much in the movie, and you cast Michael Cera at the time, even then, a pretty well-known actor.
Juno's happening.
Yeah. Super Bad, right? Yeah. So I don't know. He was on Arrested Development, obviously, too, right? So it was also a surprise to me that Scott Pilgrim disappears at the beginning of this movie. And it's much more about Ramona trying to figure out who's responsible for basically killing Scott Pilgrim, which we'll eventually learn. I thought it was pretty fun. I actually thought this is another show where I thought kind of those middle few episodes, I was like, I don't know if I'm loving this as much as I feel like the sentiment that people are having. I do feel like the ending is pretty good. I feel like it culminates in a way that makes a lot of sense and is pretty narratively satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stuff that I liked about it was I don't know, something about Ramona changing her hair a bunch of times and always having the same kind of little segment of clips of her doing that. I really enjoyed. I thought the idea of like the 7X's and the way they executed the flashback scenes was really effective. Because I think they're really great breadcrumbs to show some of Ramona's flaws throughout. And we kind of get like a little bit of a summary towards the end of like, yeah, she always runs. Like that's her thing. She like doesn't really know she's hurting people as she's leaving them behind. But she always runs. And I love how that was kind of set up throughout the episodes. Of course, it's very cheesy and like extra in a really great way. And of course, I mean, the voice actors, like the list of people that are involved in this project, and the fact that they were able to get everyone back, to me just proves like how great of a time they must have had in the original Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And Grace, you know, and anyone who has ever listened to me podcast probably knows, I don't know anyone. Like I struggle a lot with recognizing actors, like very well-known actors. I'll know them from something that's very embarrassing to even like remember they were in. I generally don't know people. And so of course my husband is like, don't look up anybody, see if you can guess like who these people are. Like, will you recognize these voices? So my question to you, Grace, is of all of the people that were involved in this project, who do you think is the first person I was able to identify? And I think maybe the only person I was able to identify.
Kieran Culkin, right?
Of course, naturally. Yeah. Wallace Wells, Mr. Roman Roy himself, specifically because let's be real and say Wallace is like a bit of Roman. Like they are very much similar.
Yeah, gay Roman, I think, is like
gay Roman. Gay Roman.
Yeah, I really remember, I think, Kieran Culkin so vividly as Wallace Wells in the original movie. I'm trying to look. This movie comes out in 2010. So I'm around the time where I'm not out as trans, but I definitely am out as gay. And so the fact of like seeing, you know, a Culkin is a name I knew, and I didn't know Kieran that much, but seeing him in there, I mostly knew him as the younger brother on in Home Alone.
I was just gonna say he's the one who pees the bed if he has too much Pepsi.
Yeah, but this was a very like, I don't know. I think 2010 is like a little bit of a different time in terms of sort of
he's not the biggest name Culkin.
Yeah, but also I think just like for queer characters, like there's not a ton, like there are
very
some
out. Like he's like very much out, and like to the point where he's like romancing some of his friends' boyfriends, which was really funny watching in both the movie and the show.
Yeah, and his story is not about coming out. It's not a tragedy. So I really enjoyed that. Like, there's like this of like, what movie should we rent? It's like, yeah, what about one with a hot guy? So that's like, and it's so nice that Scott's like, okay, sure, well, I'll do that. And he like it's one of the movies to order, which is he's also doing it so that he knows Ramona is going to deliver the DVD or whatever. But yeah, I thought Kieran Culkin was excellent as the voice of Wallace Wells in this. Yeah. But it's a litany of people in this show.
No, and here's the thing. To my dismay, I don't know how I didn't recognize Michael Cera's voice. I feel like he has a very, very recognizable voice. However, some of these other people I feel like are putting on a specific voice to the point where it's more difficult. Aubrey Plaza, very easily identifiable. Like as soon as she's on screen, I know it's her because it's literally the character she plays in everything, which is snarky, dry comedic timing, very irritable character. But yeah, I didn't really recognize anybody else. The toughest one I had actually, Chris Evans really threw me for a loop because he's putting on a very low register.
He's being a bro. Jason Schwartzman, I think, does enough like voice acting that it's hard for me. Like, I feel like he's all for me very recognizable. You have Anna Kendrick and Brie Larson obviously in there as well. Those are basically the names that I'm like, oh yeah, them. You know, everybody else. So there's some very fun like cameo stuff of people who like weren't in the movie that were very fun, particularly for me, Simon Pegg and the other guy who always is in movie, and Nick Frost are in there. Weird Al Yankovic is in there. Cal Penn, Bowen Yang. Yeah, but
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, come on, there's so many recognizable people in this, and obviously they were also in the film. But everyone does a really great job. I think the characters themselves are really fun and interesting. I feel like if you have 7 exes, you better make them pretty distinct, because otherwise they're all kind of gonna blend into each other. I felt like that was pretty well done. Like, I was able to identify. The only trouble I think I had a little bit was figuring out vegan Tom versus the blonde twin, because they were both like blonde bros, and I got a little bit mixed up. But the twin, the twin is one of the twins. So I thought it was really funny, and I liked the general idea of like, and I really liked, which we'll talk about kind of the comparison to the movie, because I really liked that we followed Ramona throughout all of the show. And so when we got to the movie and she wasn't like the lead character, I was like, oh, I'm a little disappointed. Like, I really liked Ramona.
Yeah, I think that at the time, like I think if it's Scott Pilgrim versus the World is the movie, and then you cast Michael Cera, I think it makes sense that they don't want to disappear him for the movie,
of course.
And they want him around, and so they alter the narrative so that he's the one fighting the exes. I do think that there is some fun there in the terms of like putting, so these are exes who you think, and also like Scott is not I mean, there's literally a line in this show where they're like, turns out it's kind of frowned upon for a 22-year-old to date a high school student, which I'm like,
hated that. My least favorite aspect of both TV show and movie is like, this is gross. And Wallace, to his credit, is like, break up with her, break up with her, break up with her. Like, but yeah, hated that. Absolutely hated it.
Yeah, I've seen some like critique of it that like Scott is actually not really supposed to be super,
he's like 23.
Well, no, but he's not supposed to be like rootable. Like, he's not supposed to be actually like maybe a good dude. Which I think the TV show probably does. I think because he's gone for so long, and then the way it works out at the end, right? Like, I feel like I mean, there's a way in which with the TV show, there's a way in which like you could argue that like that's not who Scott will become, like basically the Will Forte version of himself. But on the other hand, seemingly, and so again, we're dealing actually with another show. We talked about Bodies a few weeks ago, which does have time travel. We were talking about the type of time travel it is. I do feel like Scott Pilgrim versus the World is whatever happens time travel, even though Scott Pilgrim thinks, like old Scott Pilgrim thinks that it is, you can change the future, but you actually can't, because like,
well, a lot of people think that about time travel. Yeah,
it's true. So so in a way that is who Scott's going to become. So in that sense, he's like probably not a great dude.
No, right? I agree with you. I think the show does a better job at setting up Scott as like not necessarily the best protagonist. Like, he just kind of is. Whereas I feel like Ramona is the protagonist of the show. I think the movie, it's much more Scott's story and about, and we're I guess we're rooting for him in the movie. I mean, I guess I was, sure, I was rooting for him in the movie. So yeah, but I like that tweak, and I know you said this is not based on the movie, it's based off the graphic novel. So that makes sense to me, but I really liked that aspect of the show. And so I will say, like, because I watched the movie second, when I got to that, I was like a little disappointed in terms of like, dang, I really grew to love Ramona as a character.
Well, I think that's one of the things I think that is resonating for people, is that people do really like the movie. I don't think it was like a huge success at the time, but it basically became a bit of a cult favorite. Like, I don't think it made its money back at the box office, which is typically like a pretty good way to test. So I don't think it was just like huge success, but I think it had a little bit of a run of being very well received in the years after its release. But I do think, like, when you look back on it, and the changes they make to Scott and that Ramona gets a lesser role, it does feel like, I know it's 2010, but it does feel more of its time than I think this feels pretty like, they can be a little bit more exaggerated, but also in a way, I do think it's more fun for it to be Ramona who is working through her exes. Like, she has the information as to like why her exes might have done it, and she's sort of like going through to find them. That's like the first few episodes, right? Is like her encountering each of her
it's
exes.
Almost like a whodunit, right? And I like that.
Well, it's a who did it. Is a who did
it. And it's like but it's also like a monster of the week in a way on the
Right.
show where like
Right.
each week we're knocking an X off of the list, which I really enjoyed. Obviously it's not the same as how the movie handles it. But
Well, the
yeah,
movie is
I
just like
like
Scott fighting them all. And I think that like if you're gonna recreate something, why would you just create it the exact same way that the movie is?
Yeah.
And the movie made changes again that I think makes sense when you look at it. Like you have Michael Cera in your movie, so you're gonna make sure Michael Cera is like front and center in your movie. This you don't need to do that. You can like have Ramona, and so these fights are like very much like sometimes it's not Ramona versus it's like a different fight that's right, a different fight that's happening.
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
the episode
sometimes
where
it's a different
yeah,
pairing.
right. So I think that's really fun. Yeah.
And I like that there's like a battle for who's gonna be the leader of the
Mhm.
exes. I thought that was really fun that we have Matthew Patel go up against his name ends up being Gordon. It's a Gideon or
Yeah.
something. And then we
Yeah.
had the whole like Gordon and Julia
He's
situation, which was
Gordon
really fun.
Goose, but also Gideon Graves. Yeah.
That's right. But
Dating
I
Julie
really
Powers. Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, so he's dating her, and that's
Uh-huh.
really interesting. So yeah, I enjoyed the way the show worked in that it was kind of like a monster of the week format. But I thought again, like the animation style, I really enjoyed. Like that to me was very much in my comedy zone. I thought they
Mhm.
did a really great job. It felt I don't know, Grace, you tell me, like, I mean, we grew up in the 90s. Like that was our
Mhm.
cartoon era. So you had
Mhm.
things like maybe a little bit too early for or too old for us would have been like a Ren and Stimpy, but like Rocco's Modern Life, Rugrats,
Mhm.
like those,
Mhm.
SpongeBob, those types of
Mhm.
things. I feel like this kind of fits in with that somehow, like the comedy aspect, not the style of
Well,
animation, but the comedy.
I mean, it's, the idea that it's like there's like the Street Fighter thing. It doesn't like look like Street Fighter, but it has the aesthetic. I don't know if this makes sense because then
Mhm.
I'm like
Well, there's the
look and aesthetic,
slash
but like
across the screen and there's like
yeah.
verses. Yeah.
And so I feel like actually like this is very like pixelated, but like in a modern sense. So it's like not like I mean it looks a lot like it looks like the graphic novel to a degree. It does
Mhm.
feel like all of these things sort of coming off the page. The movie gets credited with being what's called like transmedia, which is basically
Yeah.
this thing of like using multiple techniques of your storytelling. And I feel like while this is like certainly completely animated, it does have that graphic novel feel. It has a video game feel. It has like an animated TV show feel. I also just think the aesthetic just works perfectly. This is a thing that I feel like, when Into the Spider-Verse, is that the first one? Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? Can't remember. Does it Across the Spider-Verse? Can't remember which is the first one. When it comes out, that feels like, oh my God, this is perfect for this type of like, this is perfect for what it's trying to do. And I feel like a lot of like animated movies have then tried to like take that style and like replicate
Mhm.
it like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles worked. I think they're just kind of like looks like that. I think that works because it's also in the same vein of like Spider-Verse, Ninja Turtles, like these like comics, animated shows we watched when we were kids, where I don't think everything necessarily like, but I think what like Spider-Verse did so well, and from the first one to the sequel, is like it it's so the animation style is so reflective of what it's trying to do. And not that like animated shows aren't always basically trying to do this of like, does it feel like the animation style reflects the story you're trying to tell? I mean, it's always trying to do
Mhm.
that, but I do feel like this one in particular, like Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, that like it's so in sync with like what it is with like what it's trying to be. I think in the animation style is blended like
Mhm.
really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah. I only had one like teeny tiny thing that I don't really understand the artistic choice in, and it
Uh-huh.
is to have the character, the 17-year-old,
Uh-huh. Knives. Yeah.
Knives, sorry, I'm,
Uh-huh.
like, blanking on her name, Knives.
Uh-huh.
Why were her eyes completely black instead of, like, having pupils like everyone else?
I
It,
don't
like,
know. I
really
don't know.
weirded me out for some reason because there were no whites of her eyes. It just felt like I was staring into an empty hole of a person, and it really weirded me out, and I don't understand the choice behind it.
So that is certainly how she looks in the graphic novel. I
Okay.
do I don't know. I don't know why.
It was
Someone
just an interesting
Todd
choice, and I was wondering, like, was it because she's younger and they wanna, like, signal this is the 17-year-old? I don't know. I mean, I thought she
Todd
was
will tell
very
us why. Todd
I'm
will tell us
sure.
why.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Todd,
Uh-huh.
in advance.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was just a very interesting choice. But I was not a huge fan of that as the storyline in general. But I love the animation style, and it made sense when I then watched the movie how it has kind of like a la Heartstopper, right, where there's things on the screen and the hearts and the little like, oh my god, sparks are real sort of thing happening. I really enjoyed that. What did you think about the change um to Ramona Flowers's job? So in the movie, she delivers for Amazon, and in the show, she delivers Netflix DVDs, which was really funny because I was like, oh, now I know exactly what time we're in.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I wonder if this is like whether or not the movie could get the rights to
Oh,
that,
interesting.
and whether that actually might be product placement in the movie to be
Oh,
the
yeah, of
Amazon
course, yeah.
delivery girl, but that doesn't really bother me. I do really like the scene. Actually, I think one of the first teaser trailers I saw was just the scene where they order the DVD and then Scott sits in
He's
front of the door and
waiting.
he's like, "You're just gonna wait?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then the like cutting to like time change I thought was like really effective. So
Mhm.
I like that a
And
fair
of course,
bit. So
there's so many nods to the movie too. That's one of them because that scene is basically directly pulled from the movie. There are a lot of those nods which I thought like fans would appreciate while still getting a different product overall, you know.
yeah.
Um yeah, I really loved that. I'm trying to think of some of the other
Can I
changes.
Well,
Go ahead.
one change that is not made from one piece of media to the other is that it's set in the great city of Toronto. What did you feel
Yes,
like? I feel like Toronto is not, it is often in media, but as fake New York mostly.
of course.
A
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff gets filmed in Toronto. A lot of TV shows get filmed in Toronto and movies. I just was listening to a podcast with Sofia Coppola, who recently directed Elvis, and she was like, yeah, it was a pretty interesting challenge to like make Graceland in Toronto and like, make Toronto
Yeah.
seem like Memphis, but you actually kind of can. But I really, as somebody who I love Toronto so much. I think this is like such a great city. I think it's like so like I think there's a ton to do. It's a great summer city. There's like the island you can go visit, the CN Tower. I like love when I like, because I didn't grow up in Toronto. I grew up in a very small town outside of Toronto, about 2-ish hours. And so every time I'm like walking my dog and I just see the CN Tower, I'm like, oh, it's so cool. It's right there. It's like was the tallest building at one point. So I love it being represented as like this place and like all these characters being Canadian. Canadians do have a thing where we get so absorbed by American media that's why we like super celebrate anything that is
You
Canadian.
love to
So
be like anytime anyone brings up like, okay, Ryan
yeah,
Gosling, he's Canadian.
Canadian. He's Canadian.
He's
There's a few
ours.
things,
He's
but
ours.
it's because our media is so absorbed and our actors have to be like pretty much successful. They have to go to America. Like
Yeah.
you can have a certain level of celebrity status in Canada without being, so if you're on like, Canadian TV shows
Mhm.
or comedy shows or whatever, but for the most part, to really make it, to really make money, you have to go to America. And so it does become this like points of pride because we watch so much American media. Like almost
Yeah.
everything I watch is American, to the point where Canada has laws about how much content on TV and the radio has to be Canadian content to make sure that like companies just won't put only American content on, right? It's with the
Mhm.
Canadian content laws. So yeah, I do love that this movie is like or the TV show is set, all of it is set in Toronto, and we get to celebrate
Yeah.
Toronto a little bit.
I mean,
Yeah.
we got a couple A's, especially out
Totally.
of
Yeah.
Scott himself.
Can I just ask you? You probably know how to do this, but can you just say where the name of the city that the show is set? Can you just say it for me?
Tor Oh, no.
You just say
Okay. I
just
know
say
the
it.
difference is that one person has the
Just
"t"
say it.
and one d
Uh-huh.
Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto. You said it right. It's Toronto. They don't really have the
Okay.
second T. It's Toronto. Yeah,
Toronto.
not Toronto. It's Toronto.
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 That was very Moira Rose sounding.
If you get
Toronto.
Canada actually has like a super pretty like there's a lot of like people like a lot of people live in like the rural parts of it, and so there's like I've
Mhm.
done the Canadian accent before, but like yeah, you could get real Toronto there, bud.
What is
If you want to go out for a rip, and yeah,
Mississauga?
Mississauga is
Mississauga?
it's part of the Greater Toronto Area, the
It's a
GTA. It's
tough
like
name.
technically, yeah, we have Scarborough and we have Etobicoke, and all these are like part of the greater Toronto area, because the city of Toronto used to be smaller, obviously, and then expand, and it's like reaching these other cities, and so like Mississauga is now part of Toronto, but it's part of the greater Toronto area.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
was looking
almost
up
like
how
it's like what you would say like Brooklyn, right? Like that's oh, I
it's a
live in
borough.
Mississauga. Like you pretty much live in Toronto, but you live in Mississauga.
Got it.
Yeah.
I was looking up to see how far of a drive it is for me to go to Toronto. Because I've never been. I've been to
8 or 9 hours. Yeah.
to Canada. No, not even. About 6.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait till the summer. Toronto's a great summer city.
Well,
if you're
the
gonna, you
thing
can
I
come
was
in the
gonna
winter, but like, yeah.
The thing I was going to say that I really liked about the show was because we were in Toronto, we got to see like the snow, and they have like some cute moments in the snow specifically, which I really liked. I love seeing snow depicted in any form of media because I'm just basic. But I really enjoyed that, and I liked that it was set in a city that is not New York City, because there's so every movie, especially Christmas movies, they're all set in New York City. And some of us we could do other cities. It's fine.
We're big cities.
I say this as a New Yorker. We could do other cities. It's totally cool with me.
Yeah, not a lot of media gets set in Toronto unless it's like Canadian media. So
and like you said, it's all fake. It's all like, this is New York. Nah, it's not. It's Toronto.
My favorite is like when I go to work and I'll be like, they do a lot of filming down where I live for movies. But you think about it, a Hallmark movie has to be filmed like probably in like July. So you'll just see like a faux Christmas tree shop like in an alleyway with like fake snow, and you're just like on the streetcar in July. You're like, that's weird.
I always think when I watch Christmas movies about how hot all the actors are probably in all their winter coats. Oh, brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
No, I like the setting. I think it's wonderful that it's both set in Canada and that it is set in Toronto, and that it highlights the city in a way.
Toronto. Yeah.
Toronto.
Go
for a rip, eh?
Yeah, go for a rip. Yeah, bud.
I still don't know what that means.
Get a double.
I know you say
it just means basically get in your car and go drive.
Are you doing donuts? Or are you just
No, it just kind of means like, oh yeah, I know we're out for a rip. You're just like, where did you go? Like, oh, we just drove. We like
for a rip.
We were driving somewhere. Yeah, basically, yeah. With your toque on, Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. Toques or beanies for those who are versed in Canadian. Also, wasn't I'm trying to see now. I'm forgetting between the show and the movie. I think the show is it someone comes out of their trailer eating a popcorn bucket filled with poutine.
Yeah. I think this is this Todd
Lucas
who ends up dating?
Oh no, Todd. It was the vegan.
Yeah,
right?
It's the vegan, because then he becomes obsessed with like butter on his popcorn, but. Yeah.
Can we talk about the vegan superpowers? Because that was one of my favorite weird things about this movie.
Yeah. He's kind of the only one who just like has super, like everything else is like pretty much.
Yeah, the twins are just smart, right?
The twins are smart. Like even the technology about like the robot creates the time travel devices, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's just like vegan superpowers that you get.
And they, see, now I'm getting confused. I think it was the show or in the movie where they take away his vegan. He broke the laws of veganism,
right?
And they take away his powers.
I think that's because he's eating the butter, right? I think.
Yeah, so it must be from the show. I'm so sorry. They blended together at this point in my mind now because I watched them so close together. But should we do some superlatives? Because I think we have some fun options here.
Let's do it.
So we have the best, I don't know, best scene is, of course, when we talk about usually on most of these podcasts. Anything come to mind, Grace, for you for the best scene?
Ooh, I do like, this is the thing where it's like, it's hard when it all blends together, but I do like the final fight scene against like future Scott. I do like that. I don't know, anything coming to mind for you?
Okay. Young Neil,
I do like,
and the entire scene where he thinks he wrote a script, and he says that the night demon or something, like there was like a night demon issue. Yeah. That entire scene had me cracking up because I was like, what is wrong with this person? What's wrong with Neil? Is Young Neil okay?
Young Neil reminds me a lot of did you watch Silicon Valley? He reminds me a lot of Big Mouth, who stumbles into things that are happening. Like he just like often just ends up like his stock will sell for a bunch of money or whatever. But I really liked Ramona when she dyes her hair at the end. I like that of like, okay, black.
I like every time she dyes it,
I
because
know,
every
it's so
time
cool.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I wanna dye my hair cool colors.
Yeah.
But my problem is, if there was a Ramona IRL that dyed her hair as often as that Ramona did, it would definitely fall out. Like, there's just, you can't bleach your hair that much, and not have it just be so just like straw, basically. So I'm very jealous, but I couldn't, because my hair also just hates color. It like rejects everything. It really doesn't like to stick.
I know Todd was hoping to make sure that we get the end of the musical, but the Scott Pilgrim musical is pretty good. Also written by
Scott Pilgrim musical.
Yeah, at the end, right? That's the
Oh,
musical.
in the sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought you meant that I misunderstood and thought you meant there's a whole nother like media product.
No. Which
I
is
really
I
enjoyed the
believe also
musical.
written by old young Neil. I wonder if we're related. It's funny.
I loved it. I thought that was great. Yeah. Okay, favorite character. I can go first on this one, because for me, it was very easy.
Yeah.
I see Kieran Culkin. I love Kieran Culkin.
Okay.
I hear Wallace. I love Wallace. I
I
loved
love
Wallace
too. Yeah.
in both the TV and the movie. I loved Wallace. I love his just like quiet snark. And he's always just there for in the movie, I loved the running gag of him always telling Scott's sister what he's up to, even when he's passed out. He somehow manages to let Scott's sister know what he's doing.
Yes.
I can't help it. I see Roman Roy. I love Roman Roy. That's it.
Okay, fair. I was really thinking you were going to go with Ramona, so I'm going to vote for
I almost did, but
I know. Yeah,
well, you got to pick Ramona, so that's good.
Yeah.
Ramona's really, I think, a really well-developed character. Like,
I agree.
I just think she's very interesting and rootable, because let's face it, like, the reason she goes on the journey in the first place for the show is because of a guy. And that, I think, on a different character might not be something we're necessarily as like gung-ho about. But I don't know, the way Ramona handles that, I feel like makes me more interested in her and makes me want to know more about her. And I think her entire journey is very, very good. And like, I love the way she like hugs herself at the end. You know, I just thought it was a really great journey for Ramona overall.
Yeah. Typically we have like, you know, if there's one to do, we have best death. If there's any death, I think I have like best fight. As a replacer for best death this episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the final fight. I think it's the best.
I was going to say that too. Because it's just so interesting and fun and like complicated.
Yeah.
And I love the nod to the movie where Scott stops to like tie his shoe before they run it. I thought that was really funny. So yeah, that was my favorite fight as well.
Yeah, I do like the Gideon versus Matthew fight as well. And then there's one where it's someone versus a bunch of, I can't remember who has to fight a bunch of things, but I remember being like, the paparazzi, is it Lucas versus the paparazzi?
Yes.
I think
yeah.
Well. Yeah.
That was fun.
Really good. I thought it was really good. The fight scenes were really good. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite X of the 7 X's?
Yeah. Obviously. What?
I said you could count the twins as one if you want.
No. It's got to be Roxy, because it's the queer. She's the lesbian ex.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah, I think
it was great, and I loved when they're, because in the show there was like they're working at like a Blockbuster or something, right? And her like kissing the other friend and then being no, it's not really. There's no spark.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, I tend to like the one who's kind of the most obnoxious. Like I really loved Matthew Patel. Like I just thought he was really funny, and I don't know, Gideon kind of lost me when he lost his mojo a bit, you know?
Yeah.
Although I did, one of the other things that I almost put as my favorite scene is when him and Lucas bro down. And then Julie returns and she's like, "What have you done to my apartment?" And she's pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Shall we rank the title? Yeah, the theme song.
Yeah. So I think I'm missing one in here. I have 5, but I think I should have 6. Do I have number 1 Continental?
Upload, I think we had put like here. I'm just gonna put
That's
it in.
right.
I
Yep.
think it's there. I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
so right currently we have number 1, The Continental from the World of John Wick. 2 is The Fall of House of Usher. 3 is Bodies. 4 is Upload. 5 is All the Light We Cannot See, and 6 is Wolf Like Me.
Yeah, I wonder if we
Scott
should be like,
Pilgrim.
if you and I should have a bit of like a rating system for this, so that like we personally can know where it goes in the rankings. That'll be interesting. We can sort of give an update, like because we're gonna get a little bit
Mhm.
overwhelmed. Just like we're like 20 weeks in, and we're like number one,
Let me
you
list
know.
the
Yeah.
entire thing.
Whereas if we like a little bit like out of 10 somethings, we maybe can then be like, okay, that's gonna slot in like fourth, and then we'll give the update.
Oh, we
That
can also, I guess, put them into tiers if that's easier.
That we could do as well. That's fun.
Maybe we should do that.
Okay, maybe between this week and next week we'll come up with like
The tier
the
names
tier
and stuff.
rankings.
Yeah.
But my initial thought, Jess, is this is far and away the best theme song. I think that
Number 1 with a bullet.
it fits the show so well. It's this thing
And
it
it
does.
gives you that nostalgia, right?
I know. There's a thing it does is that it very easily, the way that the thing, like the title goes, it does this little bit of a thing, and then Scott Pilgrim Takes Off comes on the screen. And then another show would be like, that's it, that's the thing. And then it goes into the full song and it like does the full thing every time. And I'm like, oh, so fun. Like I kind of like get lulled in. It's like, oh yeah, maybe they're just gonna do the little like Survivor, right? When they would do like they used to
Yeah.
do the full ancient voices, and then they just like did the like, little like and now but they don't. Every time they like do the little Scott Pilgrim Takes Off thing,
Yep.
and then it's like, okay, and then the full song. It's so good.
I loved it. It gave me nostalgic vibes for like old video games. And I feel like it fits the vibe of the show because not only is it, gosh, it's so hard to put the way music makes you feel into words sometimes. It
Mm-hmm.
gave me both a nostalgic retro video game feel, but also a teen, like angsty sort of vibe as well. So, like, picture a rom com from the early aughts combined with retro 80s and 90s video games. And that's what this music was. And it felt so spot on for the show that we also got. And
Yeah.
Grace, I have to say, I didn't skip the intro much.
No,
And
me either.
I watched this in 2 days. So
Yeah.
I was
Mhm.
watching them back to back to back and I still was like jamming every time. It's so good.
It's also a Japanese song. I think it's by I'd have to get it right. I'll try to see if I can get it, but it is very good. I like that it's in Japanese. I know that this show was also dubbed in Japanese as well with a full Japanese voice cast. But it's Bloom
Yeah,
by
it says
Nikai
that.
Taki. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yep. I was just looking it up. Yeah, Bloom
Yeah.
is the actual title of it.
It's
Yeah,
great.
I really loved it. It just felt perfect for what the show was. So
Agreed.
I'm
Yeah.
really happy to put this in the number 1 spot.
Yeah. Agreed. Hmm.
So yeah, those were our thoughts on Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I think if I hadn't enjoyed it, I wouldn't have bothered with the film, but it certainly got me interested enough to want to check out the movie, especially when I found out that, oh my gosh, it's the entire cast. Like, that's
Yeah.
incredible. That must mean they had such a great time. And I feel like that does translate onto the screen if an actor is having a good time. Sometimes you just like, it's just the cast felt like very close and fun together. So I
Hmm.
really enjoyed the movie as well. I do have to say, like, if I had to pick one, I liked the animated series better, but I also watched it first and I got really attached to Ramona being the lead. And so I think that really threw me for a loop in the movie. And I like the monster of the week feel of the show as well. So
Yeah.
any final
Very fun.
thoughts, Grace, from you on Scott Pilgrim?
No, I really liked it. It's not like my favorite thing I've ever watched. I love that people are loving it though. Like it's really been the overall sentiment that people have really enjoyed it. So if people were huge fans, they loved it. If they were just checking it out sort of the first time, that they also seem to really enjoy it. So I'm happy we covered it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So should we tell people what we're doing next week, Grace?
Let's do it. Mm-hmm. Do you want
So
me to? Yeah. No.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
you go. You say it. You reveal
Yeah.
it.
So we're going to stay on Netflix. There's a show coming out. I believe it comes out this upcoming Friday. It's called A Nearly Normal Family. And the synopsis is: the world of a seemingly perfect family shatters when a shocking murder proves that they're willing to make desperate moves to protect one another. I believe this is British as well, I think. So I'm excited it might be Swedish, actually,
Ooh, I would
as I'm
love that.
looking at it. So yeah, we're going pretty international here. Yeah.
I love watching international things because it's a Swedish drama.
Yeah. Based
And
on a book
because
too. Yeah.
it makes me feel so much better about myself because I'm watching things that at least they have fancy accents,
So cultured. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm so cultured. I put my
Uh-huh.
pinky out when I drink my drinks now.
Uh-huh.
Listen, I've been to Europe now, Grace, so I feel like I can say
Mm-hmm.
I'm a world traveler.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Not the whole world, just a little part of it.
An Italian traveler.
I went to Greece too.
Okay, sorry.
By the way, if you don't eat feta out there, people, you gotta eat feta. It's
an
underrated piece.
I had a Greek pasta salad for dinner. So
there you go. You're doing it, Grace.
Also cultured.
So cultured with your pinky out when you held your fork.
Yes, that's right.
So that's what's next week, A Nearly Normal Family on Netflix. So make sure to check that out if you want to hear us talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Postshowrecaps.com/full spoiler recaps. Postshowrecaps.com/subscribe is where you can see where we are covering, what we are covering, when we are covering it, all of that stuff. Grace, what else do you have going on?
So Dr. Man and I are chatting about The Curse, which is a pretty wild show. I think people are generally unsure how they feel about it when they're watching it. So maybe you need a man and I to to help you like talk through it, because I think it's fascinating. I think it's like very intentional, everything that's happening on the show. Shannon, Gus, and I are chatting through The Crown. We're doing part 1 weekly, so check that out. We just wrapped up our Tales from the Loop coverage. Rich and I are talking about Yellowstone. Then Ariel and I are talking about Post Show Recaps Theater. Each week, a different movie. This week, we are going to be talking about the new Hunger Games movie with Melissa Woodward. So very excited about that. I'm on social media at Hi From Grace. What about you, Jess?
You can find me at the Jess Sterling. Honestly, I don't have a ton of Post Show Recap stuff going on, but you can also find me on Shit 90 Shows Taught Me. We just started our Felicity coverage. I'm very, very excited. Felicity has lost her mind, and it is like, like literally, girl, you okay, BB? Like, woo! These characters are something else. So we're having a ton of fun over there. We also just celebrated Win-November. We watched Edward Scissorhands, which is also a movie that, like, what is happening? So check that out. We're heading into our festive season. And beyond that,
I just love 25 years later. You're just like, that Felicity has lost her damn mind.
She has.
So
she
funny.
Really has. I've never seen the show, but she's lost it. She's lost it. I don't know that she'll be able to find it.
I know.
You can hear me I guest appeared on One Indescribable podcast to talk about Girls 5 Eva, which if you know me, I love Busy Phillips, and she's on that. So and also Hamilton, obviously, and we have the amazing Angelica Schuyler on that show as well. And then, of course, I also guested over. I came over to Ariel and Chappelle's little podcast about Grey's Anatomy, and we drafted doctors, and it was messy fun. And that's how I would describe that podcast: messy fun. So if you
I kept thinking that I've never watched Grey's, so there was somebody named Dr. Draft.
Dr. Draft, exactly. Dr. Draft. Yeah. So go check that out because it was a ton of fun. And you can find me at the Jess Sterling on Twitter. If you want to check out anything I have going on, but we appreciate you listening. And until next time, you've been fully spoiled.